Let's take a minute and thank our sponsors for helping grow this podcast to bigger and better every episode. Our first one is SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. Our next one is Life Saving Systems Corporation. We do our work so you can do yours. Tough gear for tough jobs. Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. And Flippin' Coffee, brewing real coffee with real ingredients for real coffee drinkers. SR3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help with your helicopter training, standardization, and safety checks. Or maybe just an annual FAA refresher is what you need. They're ready to help your agency keep up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. The training staff is amazing, with certified flight instructor pilots and experienced crew members that are offering training in rescue, medical, tactical, firefighting, and ground operations. SR3 has partnered with Petzl to assist with a personal protective equipment inspection course and the highly specific Lizard, which is used for helicopter cliff and mountain rescue. And to add into it, they also teach ground, tactical, emergency care. Contact them today at sr3rescueconcepts.com. Again, sr3rescueconcepts.com, or follow them on Instagram at sr3_rescue. That's sr3_rescue. Then we have Life Saving Systems Corporation. Manufactures the world's toughest helicopter rescue gear. From their Triton harness, which is my favorite harness being a rescueman, to the rescue basket, litters, and of course the most popular hoist hook in helicopters, yes, the D-Lock. The team at LSC cuts, bends, sews, welds, and machines these products into existence every day and sends them on their way to us. We do our work so that you can do yours. LSC, tough gear for tough jobs. Check them out at lifesavingsystems.com. That's lifesavingsystems.com. And follow them over on Instagram at ResQGear. That's at Rescue Gear. Next is Breeze Eastern. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and unique mission requirements has changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, operators, and those rescued has not. Contact Breeze Eastern today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. That's breeze-eastern.com. And the last one is Flippin' Coffee. At Flippin' Coffee, we roast each batch to perfection to bring that smooth, delicious cup of coffee that you won't find in most other brands. We like to keep it simple, brewing real coffee using real ingredients for real coffee drinkers. Contact them today at flippincoffee.com. That's FLIPPIN coffee.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at Flippin' Coffee. That's at FLIPPIN coffee. As a bonus, Flippin' Coffee is given a promotion. If you punch in promotion code, all capitals, REALRESQ, you get 10% off. That's promo code Real ResQ, capitals, all capitals, REALRESQ, and you get 10%. If you're just going to send everybody an email, just make sure you tell them one thing. Quinny sent me here. And thank you to all of our sponsors. Our next guest with us, United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 437. Man, I'm psyched he came on to share some of his stories. It was awesome. And what he's done past the swimmer world is just as amazing. And, you know, he's worked hard, he's represented, and he's given back. And I love every bit of the stories that you're about to hear. So without further ado, please welcome Shannon Scaff. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I have got an amazing guest with me today. United States Coast Guard rescue swimmer number 437, Mr. Shannon Scaff. What's up, Shannon?
Hey, Jason. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Now, a lot of people are not going to ever be aware of this, but you and I officially met in North Carolina. You were a third class in the shop there at the air station side, and I came there as an airman. And I had been there for about a week, and all of a sudden you're working nights, and I roll in, and I'm still in the shop, and you're like, "Hey, airman, why don't you come for a run with me?" And I'm like, okay, I just got my ass beat all day, but why not? I'll go. Next thing I know, you and I are out running, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So that was our first.
You were, Jason, you came in, like I said the other day, a bucket of energy, man. And you still have that about you some number of years later, still pumped full of energy. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I'm high on life. I love it. Oh, thank you. So
yeah,
tell everybody out there about you and a kind of bit of your career, how you get started, and what brought you to search and rescue.
Yeah, well, it's been a hell of a ride, man. You know, I was raised here in Charleston, and I enlisted in the Coast Guard in 1993 after seeing a Coast Guard helicopter fly over downtown Charleston and do some boat work. And I thought, hey, I was at a crossroads in my life, and as a teenager, really not sure where I was headed, but I saw that, and like it was a huge enlightening and actually defining moment for me.
Nice.
And so I enlisted in '93. Of course, back then the wait for what was then the aviation survivalman rate was about 4 years, and so I spent the majority of that time at a small boat station on the Chesapeake Bay, waiting for my shot to go to school. There were 6 of us in my class, and 5 graduated.
Nice. Well done.
Chose to stay in Elizabeth City and got assigned there right out of school, and had an amazing tour there with an incredible shop and just a great unit. You know, Elizabeth City was a great first unit right out of school because you get a little bit of everything. You get some of that high seas, search and rescue, really just an incredible shop of guys that were really seasoned. Troy Lundgren is one that comes to mind. You know, Troy did a rescue from the San Francisco earthquakes way back in the day, where the separated and a car had gone down into the separation of the bridge, and Troy did that rescue. Just a lot of great guys that came out of Kodiak that were
Nice.
there, and so I learned a lot from those fellows.
Yeah.
So I finished up an extended tour in Elizabeth City, flying on 60s and 130s. Took a slot in Savannah. Flew out of Air Station Savannah and Charleston Executive Airport, a little air facility here. So I had an opportunity to run search and rescue out of my hometown. And while I was there, I decided to, I think I'd had about 7.5, 8 years total as a swimmer, decided to try my hand at shot at officer candidate school, and I got selected for that.
Nice.
In 2004, went on to OCS and received a commission in December of that year. And then just had a great career as a commissioned officer. Retired in 2017 as a lieutenant commander.
Congratulations.
Right back here at home as a chief of contingency planning. So basically, I was the emergency manager for Coast Guard Sector Charleston, which was a great segue into what I do now in my second career. I work in the mayor's office downtown here as the director of emergency management for the city of Charleston. So
that is awesome.
Great segue into my second career, and that's what I'm doing now, back here at home, running hurricanes again, right here from the hometown.
Yeah, never stops. It never stops.
Yeah.
Once you get that bug, man, you're in.
True, it's true, and awesome. I really enjoy this line of work. You know, it's neat to be on this side of it. And, you know, I oftentimes leverage my experiences as a swimmer. Some of those lessons we take with us for the rest of our lives. And it's just proved to be very, very beneficial, very useful to my current career in terms of how I see things, how I manage, risks, how I leverage the team. All those kinds of things are directly attributed to my time as an AST.
That is awesome. That is what a great career you've had. I'm going to get into it a little bit later in what you've done, even after you left the swimmer rate to go officer. And there's only a handful of guys that went from rescue swimmer to officer. Now there's two sides. There's the warrant officer. So some of the guys, they get up to chief, first class, chief, senior chief, and they end up going to the warrant officer program. And then they go and they do another part of the job that the Coast Guard does. And then there's a handful of guys, including yourself, Shannon, that went OCS and officer and started as, an ensign or JG and then lieutenant and continued up. So well done, sir.
I appreciate that, man. It was an honor. And honestly, the biggest blessing of my life is to have been a part of that organization, but even just within that organization, to be so fortunate to be a part of the rescue swimmer community, really truly is the greatest honor of my life to be, to have a group of guys and gals like that around me. And those relationships I take with me for the rest of my life. So very, very, very blessed to be a part of it all.
Awesome. Love it, man. I love it. Well, I got to ask. So tell me your very first SAR case. And I know you remember it because you're like me and it's like, man, it just stands out to you. And you're like, oh yeah, that was my first one.
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually. So you may remember Jeff Johnson.
Oh yeah, Jocko
Johnson. He and I went to A school together. We were classmates, and we went through the qualification process together to get qualified on the 60, the pre-through post-flight letter, and all the things that you have to do to get through the swimmer syllabus. We did some time on the 130 line side for a little bit together. And we basically qualified together. And It just so happened that I had the duty. I was on the rotation right before him. And so he was working nights. And, it was my first duty day as a qualified swimmer. And I'm over in the barracks sleeping. And Jocko comes in at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and says, "Scaff, get up." And he turns my light on and I'm looking at him. He goes, "You're getting your first one." And just as soon as he said that, the alarm went off for a medevac off of a Greek container ship. And I thought, 4 years of waiting for school and all of the hell that is included in school, plus the qualification process, EMT training, now comes down to this moment. And
yes.
It just doesn't really matter what the details of the case are. To have everything that you've worked for over the last 5 years come to this singular moment in time, it's just such an incredible feeling. It was like my Super Bowl. And, looking back on it now, it was a relatively benign case. It was a hoist of me to a giant container ship that was like the size of 10 football fields, in flat, calm weather. And it was to do a medevac of a woman who was suffering some internal bleeding. And I distinctly remember some of kind of the challenges I was faced with that were, sort of language barriers and, getting a Stokes litter around a corkscrew set of stairs all the way up to a berthing area to load her up and then get her down all of those stairs in the litter. That's not something I had really trained for in A school. And so it was sort of, okay, well, this is what it's like to really be in it. The sights, the smells, the sensations of being on a ship. And it just was an incredible feeling of accomplishment and teamwork with, seeing crew resource management in play and just being part of it, sitting in the doorway and thinking to myself, wow, it's come to this moment. And of course, little did I know that that would be the very beginning of just an incredible ride as an AST. So yeah, I have a fond memory of my very first case.
Dude, that is awesome. Oh, there's so much to take out of that too, which makes it even more fun because it's not, like you said, you're the only guy that goes down. And there's a lot of people that don't quite understand as not only as rescue men, but specifically Coast Guard rescue swimmers. We are it. The pararescue guys, they'll go two at a time or whatnot. And there's a pair. For us, it's just us. And then we have to use all our resources down underneath them. We're figuring stuff out to get our victims or whatnot up to the helicopter. And you did it, man. That's awesome. Dude, what a great first case.
Yeah, it really was. It was a lot of fun. And, one of the things I remember most about that is, of course, Jocko and I went through this process together. And I remember the excitement on his face coming to wake me up that I was going to get my first case. I mean, he was genuinely excited for me. And that's one of the things I remember most about that is just being woken up by him and him smiling ear to ear, just excited that after everything that he and I had just been through, I was going to get my shot, which just was super cool,
That is awesome. That's awesome. Shout out to Jocko. Nicely done, Jocko.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, killer. So now kind of getting into your career now, you've probably seen a couple more or and I remember being in East City while I was an airman and listening to that alarm go off quite a few times in the few months that I was there. And it was always, for me, I loved that sound. It was like, oh yes, we get to go, do what we trained to do. And that was a big moment for me, as somebody that was getting ready to go what you've already gone through. I'm going to school, but to listen to that, it was like, yes, okay, that I'm driving for that. I want this. And it was a big factor for me to, get through school, and it was awesome. But as you continue there, so you got a couple other kind of good sized awards, and I'm going to touch on the first one real quick, and then I'm going to read the second one. So just to touch on number one is you got an air medal. So well done for let me read this specifically. It was for Hurricane Floyd that hit Eastern North Carolina. And you participated in rescuing of 115 men, women, and children during the flood relief operations. Dude, that is awesome.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but I got to tell you, the team effort there went beyond just our immediate air crew, but the team effort was really just about, I think every military service was represented there in that. Awesome. And, I'd be sitting in a hover in the doorway, and just about every 10 degrees I'd look, there'd be another helicopter off in the distance doing the same thing I was doing.
Yeah.
There was enough search and rescue to go around for everybody for days with that one. And, that was in 99, I believe.
1999, September Floyd, 17 and 18. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. So that was before Katrina, which was, I think, in 2005. And so none of us had ever really seen anything like that in terms of a mass rescue from a hurricane that I could recall in my career. And I don't believe we saw anything after that until Katrina hit. So it was pretty crazy. I was actually that morning, when the hurricane had passed over the night before, I was due to be the oncoming swimmer that next morning. And I had no idea, Jason, what was going on at the air station. I lived in the Coast Guard housing complex just outside the main gate.
Yep.
Nobody had called me to say it was Armageddon out there. I had no idea that there was anything out of the ordinary happening until I pulled up to the air station. And usually the first indication that something is is kind of sideways, as you'd see all those news media trucks with the satellite dishes up top.
Yeah. Yep.
They'd be parked. And so as I rounded the corner, I saw all those. And then I saw the parking lot full of cars. And I thought something is up. And I walk into our shop, and there's like 27 rescue swimmers in there, most of which I'd never met, because I had only graduated school 2 years before. And so I hadn't even been to a recert yet.
Wow.
So there was dudes, there was rescue swimmer gear everywhere. There were guys running around, and one guy that I didn't know turns and looks at me frantically, and he goes, "Are you Shannon?" And I said, "I am." He goes, "Dude, your aircraft is turned up out there waiting on you." And the first thing I did was I looked at my watch, you know, and turned. It was like 7:15 in the morning, and turnover isn't until 8, so I'm early. And I'm like, "Somebody want to tell me what's going on?" They're like, "Yeah, you haven't heard, have you?" And I said, "Well, no." And he said, "Well, the Rocky Mount Tarboro area is completely underwater. You're going to want to grab your gear and get out to that plane pretty quick." And
oh my God.
And that's, Jason, that's how it happened. And so I literally grabbed my gear. I met up with my air crew, who was sitting there waiting on me, and briefed that, you know, that I would be there. And so they were waiting. And as soon as I got in, there was, I believe, news media was there in the plane with us. And we took off, and we headed towards Rocky Mountain. I think it was about a 25-minute flight to the scene. And we had already received tasking to go to a barn at a specific location where there was known to be many people in this barn. And so we get there, and there's a 65 already in a hover hoisting, and we're behind it, and there's another helicopter behind us. And the 65 moves away, we move in, and we lowered me to the water, and I'm about chest deep water, wading through to this barn. Jason, I open the door to the barn, and all I can see are these blinking eyeballs looking at me.
Holy
and there
cow.
must have been 60, 70 people in there.
Oh my God.
In chest deep water. In a barn that was pitch black. There are people up in rafters. There are men, women, children. And I just said, I had no idea when I opened that door what was going to be waiting on me on the other side. And I said, "Okay, well, let's get busy." And I said, "Is anybody sick?" And there was, you know, one person that wasn't feeling well. I said, "All right, children." And I just started taking kids and mothers, and one after the other started hoisting them up. And by the time I was done, the flight mech signaled to me to be hoisted. I came up into the cabin, and it was so full that I could barely get myself into the plane and shut the cabin door behind me. It was literally every place you could put a person in the back of that helicopter, there was a person.
Wow.
And Jason, we did that all day until we basically worked our way into the bag. And we weren't the only ones. There were CH-46s and 65s and Navy Seahawks, and just anything and everything was out there hoisting. It was incredible. And of course, you know, some years later, we would come to see Katrina,
right?
Which was a major metropolitan area. You know, Rocky Mountain Tarboro, not so much. It's Eastern North Carolina, relatively rural, but there was a lot of people in trouble that day.
Wow. Shannon, well done, man. And it actually does talk about a little of that on the award here. It says specifically that in Tarboro, they had a levee break. And that's one of the reasons, because the water had gotten, basically the rains were so heavy that it filled up the river and the lake, and boom, next thing you know, levee breaks and floods out the town. It's crazy. So
yeah, it happened really fast. If you look at, so Sean Lansing did the first rescue from that. And the night before, he was called out. There was a semi truck that had gotten in trouble, and the guy had gotten stuck. And by the time they established themselves in a hover, there was water about at the wheel well of this semi truck. By the time Sean Lansing got into the doorway to pull this truck driver out, the water was pouring in the top of the window.
Holy cow.
That's how fast that water rose. It was minutes. And so it caught a lot of people off guard. It's really incredible that more people didn't die in that. It's pretty amazing.
Wow, man. Awesome, dude. Awesome. Good job. Good job for you and everybody else. And I say this with that hurricane, Katrina, Harvey, all of them that people have gone to. They have a really good setup right now, and they learned from all these. And man, awesome. God, that's killer. 60 eyeballs looking at you. You're like, hello.
Yeah, it was really quite surprising. Oftentimes when we get called out on a search and rescue case, you get the report that it's one thing, and then you get on scene and you find that it's something else entirely, or not quite as bad or worse. This was one of those situations where I thought I was going to go down and hoist like 5 or 6 people. And when I opened that big barn door and looked, there were literally people in it was everywhere, wall to wall people. And I just thought, oh, we're going to be here for a while doing this. And it was an incredible event. And just the coordination that went into that, the teamwork.
What's great about it now. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, so the greatest part about where you're at now is you're on the side that coordinates a lot of that. So is that accurate?
Yeah. As the emergency management director for the city, yes, it's oftentimes I have a very unique opportunity working at an executive level now, where I can use my experiences and say, listen, when I'm urging you to leave in advance of a hurricane's arrival, it's because you have a different perspective as a former Coast Guard swimmer. I was the guy on the end of the hook, and I'm telling you, you don't want to be the person that's being put in a basket. If you're lucky, you get to be a person that's put in a basket. The unlucky ones are the ones that never make it. And, that tends to get people's attention down here in Charleston. We're a low-lying area, very flood prone.
Yeah.
And so I'm probably the only emergency management director in the country that can say I was, a Coast Guard swimmer, and I was the guy that was put down to rescue you folks. So trying to do everything I can to avoid a situation like that. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Awesome. God, I love it. All right. So now I'm going to move forward a little bit further. So this is, 8 months later, literally 8 months later, you earn your second air medal. And I'm going to read this because I really want to go into detail with this. It's an amazing story. Citation to accompany the award of the Air Medal, Gold Star in lieu of second, to AST-3 Shannon F. Scaff, United States Coast Guard. Petty Officer Scaff is cited for meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight on 29 May 2000, serving as a rescue swimmer aboard Coast Guard Helicopter 6031. The aircrew was engaged in a perilous night rescue of 2 persons and their pet dog from the sailing vessel Irish Mist that sank 110 nautical miles northeast of Coast Guard Air Station Elizabeth City. Petty Officer Scaff provided vital navigation backup and expertly maintained radio guard as the Coast Guard rescue helicopter flew through torrential rains, 60-knot winds, and 200-foot ceilings. Shortly after arriving on scene, Petty Officer Scaff was deployed into the tumultuous seas. While attempting to place the first survivor and the dog into the rescue basket, a 30-foot wave crashed over them, causing the survivor, the basket, and the dog all to become separated. Petty Officer Scaff swiftly recovered each as the flight mechanic stabilized the rescue basket. Undaunted, Pediatric Scaff negotiated the heavy seas and maintained a physical grasp of the survivor and the dog with one hand and positioned the rescue basket with the other, individually hoisting the survivor and the dog. Pediatric Scaff's skills were again needed to recover the last survivor from the violent seas. Pressing the limits of his physical endurance, he expertly positioned the survivor in the rescue basket despite repeated battering by the huge waves. Timing the approaching seas with perfection, Pediatric Scaff quickly gave the ready for pickup signal to the flight mechanic, and the survivor was lifted safely aboard the Coast Guard rescue helicopter. Pediatric Scaff's actions and exceptional skills were instrumental in the life-saving rescue of all on board the sailing vessel Iris Mist. His courage, judgment, and devotion to duty are most heartily commended in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Coast Guard. Dude, what? That's insane. That's awesome. You've got a lady and her dog and getting hit by a 30-foot wave. What? Sick.
Yeah, that was a fun night. That was a fun night.
Okay. All right. So let's back up to the beginning of this. So you're on duty, call comes in, put the Ready H60 on the line, and what do you hear?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I wasn't the duty swimmer, as was the case. Yeah. So Irish Mist was one of a series of boats that was caught in this nor'easter Memorial Day weekend. It was the first one to get out a Mayday call, but there was a couple of other boats to the south, 100 miles to the south, that were in even more dire straits. They had some significant injuries on board, and these two individuals and the dog were not injured, though they were not in good shape. Those 30-foot seas definitely battered that boat. There were some folks on these boats to the south that were, as I recall, in pretty big trouble, and they were hurt. Oh, and wow. So they had the unit sent at least one helicopter, I believe it was two, with C-130 escort down south to rescue those folks. And that was Doug Hanley and Troy Lundgren were involved in those rescues.
Awesome. And
so I was actually called in to do the Irish Mist rescue. And they were 100 miles offshore, I believe. It was, 2, 3 in the morning. And, as most swimmers do, you take a look and see who your crew, what your crew makeup is. And I had Lieutenant Commander Randy Watson as my aircraft commander for that one. Nice. And what I distinctly remember is when we got on scene, first of all, it's pitch black out there. We were getting bumped around pretty good. If you remember Randy Watson, he was a very seasoned helicopter pilot. I believe he was a former Army aviator, maybe.
Nice. I'm sorry, I do not, and I apologize to every pilot there in East City. The guys that I remember were the swimmers. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. Take my word for it. Randy was top notch, and I remember he had this very calm demeanor about him. He's a very, very strong communicator, but very calming. And as we're orbiting around the Irish Mist, watching this thing get beat up by the waves, we're getting ready to make our approach to the water. And Lieutenant Commander Watson says, gentlemen, listen, this is one of those nights that we've really got to refresh our memories in terms of egress. If we need to get out of this aircraft, you're going to need to do it in a hurry. Wow. And I've got some concerns this evening. And so when an aircraft commander that's seasoned like Randy, that's coming to us from Kodiak, multiple tours in Alaska, when he says something like that, you pay attention.
Wow.
And that's the first thing that I remember about that case. The next thing I remember is it not going as advertised. we had, to be perfectly honest with you, I'll go on record and say this, we had very little interest in picking up that dog. It was a large dog, okay. And it was probably quite frantic. In fact, I can tell you with absolute certainty, it was really very frantic for a little while. And the briefing that we included to these two individuals on this boat was that we were going to get them and not the dog. Just because of the overall risk associated with all of that. And we were not going to get the dog. Well, it was no sooner that we had briefed that than the gentleman jumped overboard with the dog.
Oh my
both of them with
gosh.
life jackets and strobes activated.
What?
And so it was, okay, checklist part 2 for the harness deployment of the rescue swimmer to the survivor and the dog. So, I mean, it was literally right in the middle of the brief. It was like, okay, skip the rest of this. Let's just go get this guy. And so I lowered to the water. And, you know, you've been hoisted to heavy seas, Jason. You know what that's about. That first one hits you, and it's a wake up call.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be in the aircraft looking down. It's another thing when the first one hits you and you start swinging. You start to realize the totality of the power and circumstances, and you start to feel like you're very, very small in a very vast ocean. And so I disconnected and I went to go get this guy. And to be honest with you, I was a little bit irritated with him because he just completely blew off our brief, literally jumped overboard with this dog in the middle of the brief.
So you're swimming towards him just pissed off. You're like, you son of a beast.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, Shannon, I love it.
Yeah, because now see, I don't know this dog. You know, Jason, I mean, they can turn in an instant. And when they're backed into a corner, it is fight for survival for them. They don't know that I'm there to help them.
Right.
So I swim up to the guy, and I just remember it being very loud at the surface of the water. It was very windy. The waves crashing around us. It was just extremely loud, almost jet engine loud. And so I'm yelling at him to hold his dog, and I've got him, and do exactly what I say.
Nice.
And his eyes are as big as a dinner plate. Okay. And he just rolled over, and I did a kind of a standard equipment carry, just grabbed his life jacket and started to pull him towards the basket. And the basket was lowered down. Our hoist operator, flight mechanic was Adam Sustachek, who had great flight mech, but had never hoisted to any conditions like that. And any seasoned flight mech will tell you that when you're in big, mountainous seas, you've got to put out a lot more cable because that basket's going to be very susceptible to being jerked around as the waves drop out from under you.
Agreed.
And Adam, unfortunately, did not pay out a whole lot of slack for me. And he just didn't know. He just didn't have that experience yet, but he was about to get it. And I grabbed the basket, and as quickly as I could, and Jason, you'll know this, there's always that very uncomfortable period of time when you're under the aircraft and you've got that equipment around you, and you've got a survivor, and there's just a lot going on and a lot to think about in that moment. And it can be very unforgiving. And so as I'm trying to put this individual and manipulate him so that he goes in the way we want him to with the dog, who is going crazy, the wave, one of those waves drops out from under us and breaks over the top of us. And I'm in a washing machine at that point. I feel the basket rip out of my hands. I come to the surface of the water. I'm nowhere near the position relative to the aircraft that I was. I look to my left and I see the gentleman waving his arms at me. He's probably already 40, 50 feet away from me, just in seconds.
Wow.
And then I look beyond him and I see the dog. And so I'm like, okay, well, dog's gone. I now have to go recover my survivor. And what is the thing they teach you in school as a student? To never let go of your survivor, right?
Right.
Well, I'm here to tell you, Mother Nature has other plans. We know to maintain grip of our survivor, and that's all great in the textbook. Yeah. But when you get into the real environment, sometimes you don't have a choice. It's going
Right.
to take what it wants to take.
Yeah.
And so I went back and got the individual, and, with my tail between my legs a little bit, having, let go of him. I went and recovered.
You know what, Shannon, just for the record, I'll give you a pass for that. Okay.
Yeah. All's well that ends well.
Mother
All's well that
Nature,
ends well.
1, Shannon 0. Don't
Right.
worry. Shannon wins the battle.
Yeah, that's it. I get to win the war. They won the, but anyway, I did recover him, and I'm yelling into my radio, pay out slack. Well, basket comes down, and man, Adam just zipped all the line out of that hoist right into the water. He learned his lesson there, and I had plenty of cable to work with. Got the guy in the basket, hoisted him up without a vent, and then I turned around and looked, and I could still see the faint strobe light on that dog. And I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. Let's just see what happens, because it's going to make for a great story if nothing else. But maybe I saved the life of a dog. All right, we'll see.
Oh man.
Well, remember, this Labrador was very, very aggressive. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was taking a chance with this guy. So I swim up to him, and he's looking at me, and he's frantically paddling any and every direction. He has no idea where he's going. He's out of his mind at this point, and I can see that. And he's tired. And so I come up to him, and I spin him around, and he immediately goes limp.
What?
So I'm doing an equipment carry on a life jacket that's being worn by a dog, and he is 100% cooperative with everything I'm telling him. So
yes.
I look up, Adam drops the basket down. I put the dog in the basket. He's the sweetest thing ever. Doesn't fight me at all. And as I'm talking to you right now, I can see the look in this dog's face as he's peering through the bottom of the basket, looking at me while he's being hoisted into the aircraft. From there, I was hoisted back into the plane, and we reestablished a position over the sailboat to pick up the last survivor, the female, who I believe was really the captain of that vessel.
Okay.
And she jumped over, and I did the same thing, just did a harness delivery to the water, and recovered her, put her in a basket, and off we went. And that's, it was kind of just another night for the Coast Guard. A great team effort. We all learned something that night. Again, the thing that sticks out most to me was the very stoic Randy Watson and his voice, and telling us, guys, we need to not blow through our egress procedures tonight. Let's really pay close attention to just go through in your mind, please, what you're going to do if we have to ditch.
Wow.
That was the only time I'd ever heard a pilot say anything like that with such, just such focus and so much meaning behind it. The man was really concerned, and that meant a lot coming from a dude that had been in Kodiak a couple of times.
Wow. Yeah, it makes your butt pucker a little bit when you get on the aircraft, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, if he's telling me, I probably need to pay attention.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah.
Shannon, that's awesome. That is awesome. Good job. Good job. You and the whole crew.
It.
Awesome job. Awesome job. All right. Now I want to get into another one. And this one is, you and I talked about this offline just a little bit. And that is the write-up on this is only, it's okay. Like you earned this, you and Troy Lundgren earned this together on an amazing case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first part of this and I'm going to stop at about halfway through because, and this is no offense to anybody that wrote it, but the write-up doesn't do it justice to what you guys had to go through. So if that's okay with you, I'll read it right up until basically the weather had deteriorated and things went south. And that's when you guys, plural, 2 swimmers, ended up saving 4 people. So is that cool?
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right. So your next big one. Citation to accompany the award of the Distinguished Flying Cross to Shannon F. Scaff, Aviation Survival Technician, 3rd Class, United States Coast Guard. Petty Officer Scaff is cited for extraordinary heroism while participating in aerial flight on 25 January 2000 while serving as rescue swimmer aboard Coast Guard HH-60J helicopter 6009. The crew was engaged in a rescue of 4 fishermen from the fishing vessel Abby Ann Smith that was being plummeted by the sudden onset of a vicious nor'easter. The storm was producing 60-knot turbulent winds and generating a 25-foot confused sea. Ceilings ranged from 100 to 300 feet and visibility dropped to 1/8 of a mile in the driving range, snow, sleet, and freezing temperatures. The Abby Ann Smith's master reported that he was unable to keep up with the flooding, green water washing into the lower holds. The flooding caused the vessels to lose its backup battery power, leaving its onboard bilge pump systems inoperative. The Coast Guard rescue helicopter delivered a dewatering pump to the vessel, but the pump was inoperative. The Coast Guard helicopter returned to Elizabeth City to refuel and pick up more dewatering pump. Petty Officer Scaff volunteered to go out as a backup swimmer. When the Coast Guard helicopter returned to scene, the weather had deteriorated. And then from there, I'm going to ask you to pick it up because, again, the writing does not do it justice with this. So, Shannon, you're volunteering to jump on to the aircraft with a swimmer that's already there. And they had already gone out to drop one pump and have to come back to get more. Wow. Okay. Hit me. Like, what happened?
Yeah. So with that search and rescue case with the Abby Ann Smith, again, it was a situation where I was actually not on duty. Troy Lundgren, who I mentioned earlier, was on duty, and you'll agree with me, Troy, in stature, in terms of physical stature, his level of professionalism,
Totally.
Troy epitomizes everything that you would believe in a Coast Guard swimmer, or even, dare I say, a Navy SEAL or Air Force pararescue guy. This guy just exudes badass, right? Everybody
6'4",
that.
wide shoulders, skinny waist,
square
totally
jaw.
ripped.
I mean, just a really intense guy. But I mean, the man that I looked up to, I believe, most in my AST career was Troy Lundgren, and he happened to be the duty swimmer that night. And I was just doing what we call the mid watch. So it was my job, along with some other line crew members, to go out and wash airplanes and do maintenance on the aircraft overnight until 8 o'clock the next morning. And then I'd go home and go to bed. Well, I showed up for my shift at about 11:30 that night, and it's blowing 60, 70 mile an hour winds out there. It was like a hurricane in January. So it was a pretty miserable night on coastal North Carolina. And the first thing I notice when I get out of my car, as I'm able to push against the wind with my door to get out, is I can hear a 60 on the other side of the hangar deck turned up. And I'm like, well, that's not engine trials. That not on a night like this.
Yeah.
That's a case. And so I walked into the swimmer shop, got my stuff together, and walked on over to the hangar to learn what was happening. And as I walked up, the night shift crew was there, and I said, "Hey, somebody want to tell me what's going on?" And they said, "Well, yeah, they got this boat that's off of Virginia Beach right now that's taking on water." And I looked at the chart behind them and could see who the crew was, and I saw that it was Troy, and I said, "Well, he's going to get a good one tonight." And they went on out there. I think they were gone for about an hour and a half or so, came on back, and I couldn't wait to line up with my mentor and find out what he had seen, because I could only imagine what the conditions were like out there. I mean, it was definitely the nastiest night that I had seen in my time there in North Carolina. Definitely, by far. Just in terms of temperature, wind, precipitation blowing sideways. It was a terrible, terrible night. And so they come, they shut down after they land, and they come into the hangar door, and there's Troy, and they all look beat up. I mean, beat up. And I said, "Hey man, tell me what are you seeing out there?" And he said, "It's not over, Shannon. This is a bad one."
Holy cow.
And they're walking into the operations center, all of them kind of in a single file line with the aircraft commander leading the way. He said, "We're headed into the ops center right now. The guys are having a hard time keeping the pump running," which was pretty standard. We maintain these dewatering pumps to the nth degree. All of us know them inside out. We run them every month. And we know that if there's a problem with the dewatering pump, it's typically the operator and not a malfunction of the equipment itself.
I very much agree with that statement.
And you have to understand, these guys, they're out of these survivors that are out there. This is the first time they've ever even seen a pump. So it makes sense that they would have a hard time with it. And he said, "I'm going to go into the operations center, get on the radio with them and see if I can talk them into, getting these pumps started." And I said, "Well, Troy, do you mind if I follow you in there?" He said, "No, not at all." Because I really genuinely wanted to watch this thing happen amongst this crew that just went out there and risked their lives to rescue these 4 fishermen. And so I walk into the operations center, and they're all huddled around the radio, and Troy is on the radio with them, trying to talk them, into how to run the pump. And at some point, I could see the frustration on Troy's face, and he pulls the radio mic away from him, and he looks at the aircraft commander, Mark Ward, and John Milton, both ACs, both lieutenants, both great guys. And he looks at them, and he says, "Gentlemen, this is not going to work. These guys are not getting it." And this, in terms of my Coast Guard career, is probably, other than losing a friend in a helicopter crash, one of the most defining moments for me in terms of when I look back at my career, the most defining moment. These 4 men, Troy and Craig Davis, who is a brand new, right out of school flight mech, and 2 relatively junior pilots, looked at each other, and together they made a decision to go back out and try to do this again after they had just had their asses handed to them. Apparently this flight was very, very rough. When I tell you these dudes looked like they were defeated, when they came in, they were exhausted. I'd never seen anything like this before.
Wow.
One of the pilots, John Milton, excused himself from the group. He said, "Gentlemen, can I have a minute?" He went into the bathroom and sort of left everybody there to kind of chat for a minute. He came back out and he said, "I'm in." And Mark Ward, the other lieutenant who was sitting right seat, said, "Well, look, we don't go unless we're all in. And there's no shame in one person saying we're not going back out."
Wow. Holy shit.
This really happened. I watched this happen, and these men were speaking from the heart. This was as legit a thing as I'd ever seen amongst 4 aircrew members. And John Milton, who was sitting left seat before, what I came to learn was he went into the bathroom and prayed about this. That's why he went to the bathroom. He excused himself. He was in there for probably 30, 45 seconds. He came back out and said, "I'm in." It makes me emotional. It's the reason why it's such an impactful moment for me is these 4 men legitimately came together and agreed together, from the most junior to the most senior, to go out and do this together, knowing full well they may not make it back.
Holy shit.
That literally happened, Jason. I watched it happen. When you think about Troy, who is basically a Greek god, okay?
That's such a true statement too.
It really is. He's like an NFL linebacker, this guy. And he was humbled. They decided to go out. And so I looked at Troy as I walked them out of the ops center into the hangar and walked with him to the door. And I said, go get him, big dude. I mean, this is your night. This is your case. Go get him. And I was as happy for him as Jocko was for me on my first case.
Yeah.
That's how we are with one another, because each one of those cases is like our Super Bowl.
Right.
And you only get so many of those in your career. A lot of swimmers, most swimmers, in fact, never see a case like that.
True.
It doesn't happen often. And so Troy walked out with the rest of the crew, got himself strapped into the aircraft. I heard the engines spool up. They released the rotor brake and the phone rang. And the 60 maintenance control chief answered the phone. It was Dennis Hennessy. And he goes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got him right here. And he holds the phone away from his mouth and he goes, Shannon, you got your gear ready? And I looked at him and I said, who is it? And he goes, it's the D5 Admiral.
Oh my God.
Are you kidding me? He goes, no. He goes, they want a second swimmer on this plane.
Holy shit.
So I didn't know this at the time, but these guys were feeling 60-foot seas that night.
Oh my God.
So the offshore buoys were reporting, 40 to 60 foot and even greater waves off of Virginia Beach. They were about 40 miles off of Virginia Beach. They were not going to make it to shore. They were not going to make it. And the District 5 Admiral called and said, I want a second swimmer on that plane, because they knew that Troy was going in the water.
Wow.
And if something happened, they wanted a backup to go get Troy. And that's why I was there.
Wow.
I was Troy's backup. If Troy got in trouble, it was on me to get down there and get him. And
wow.
The gravity that comes with that, like you said earlier, most of the time, Jason, we work alone in terms of once we leave the aircraft.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we're alone. In some ways, we're very much not alone. We have a crew there. We have 130 over our heads, still very much a team, but there are some real aspects to this job that are very lonely. And so to be involved in a case like that with a guy like Troy, and to have it on me to be his backup, was something any one of us would have taken very seriously, and I did. And so I went and got my gear, and I fought through that wind to get to the aircraft, and the cabin door opened. And I'm soaking wet already. And all I can see is Troy Lundgren looking like Cheshire Cat with his big grin on his face from ear to ear, sitting in the BA seat, and this green glow stick, hanging from behind him. And his smile, right? Yeah. I mean, Troy had that big smile. And I plugged in the ICS. He said, you ready to do this with me tonight? And that was the first thing. And they all kind of laughed for a second. I'm like, man, this is nuts. This is nuts. Jason, the first indication of what I was getting ready to get into was when we pulled in to do a hover check.
Okay.
So they pulled power. We got away from the hangar and they pulled power. And immediately the aircraft started jolting around.
Wow.
And, you know, how many times have you been sitting in a 60 and it pulled into a hover, and you're used to that sensation. And if something's weird, you know it right away. It sounds different. It feels different.
Yep.
This was one of those nights where they pulled into a hover and it was not like it normally feels. It was a struggle from the very beginning.
Dang.
And, you know, I back up and I tell you, the pilot that sat right seat for the first sortie said, we can go out, but I can't take right seat again. He forfeited the right seat because he couldn't do it again.
Wow.
So we went ahead and nosed over and we headed out and made the trek across Eastern North Carolina out offshore. And it's pitch black and we're getting bumped all over the place. It's pretty quiet and nobody's really saying much. And we get out to this boat and, you know, pilot calls 90 seconds out and we got him in sight. And I look down, the cabin door comes open, you know, and the night sun is on this boat. And I look down, I'm on gunner's belt, and I look down, and it's my first visual on what's getting ready to happen. I could not believe the conditions, man. I couldn't believe this is something you Kodiak guys see. This boat, it was a big fishing boat, was getting thrown around like it was nothing. I mean, I thought it was going to capsize bow over stern, honestly. I don't know how it didn't capsize. And so the waves, you know, I can picture it right now. They were just enormous. It was almost cartoon-like. And so what we did was we briefed that there was a big discussion about whether Troy was going to do a direct deployment, which we know is sometimes very hard to do in heavy seas.
Right.
You know, it's where the swimmer stays attached to the cable and has to rely on the conning commands of the hoist operator to literally get them within arm's reach of a survivor. Not an easy thing to do when you're in 60-foot waves. Yeah, not an easy thing to do in 60-foot waves.
The cable management on the flight mech side of things, just to be able to do that, is insane.
And it was Craig Davis. And Craig was right out of A school. It was his first unit. He'd never seen anything like this. And so Craig did a phenomenal job delivering 2 dewatering pumps to this vessel. Now he's being asked to do a direct deployment of Troy, not to some junior rescue swimmer, but of Troy, who is one of the, you know, an incredibly seasoned, smart, godlike rescue swimmer. That's not somebody you want to jerk around. You want to be on your A game with a guy like that.
Yeah, because you know if you mess him up, he's going to come back to the aircraft and beat you to death.
Yeah, you're going to mess up one time. The next time they're going to get another flight net. So poor Craig's feeling the pressure on this thing, and let me tell you something. He answered incredibly, and so he puts Troy down, and 1 minute turns into 5, turns into 10, turns into 20, turns into 30, and we still don't have this first survivor yet.
Oh my God.
It took a half hour of fighting. It felt like a half hour of trying to line, you know, it'd be forward and right 20, back, you know, forward and right 15, hold, back. Like it just, the conning commands were all over the place because Craig just simply could not get Troy in a position and then lower him down because the waves were so big that it's all about timing. And these seas are all over the place. And it just wasn't working. And so I called for an abort. Everybody was fixated. The 2 pilots, 1 pilot in the left seat's calling out, you know, power, because there's a wave that's over the top of the helicopter.
Jesus.
His only job was to look out the windscreen and call out waves. And the other pilot is actually flying the aircraft and doing everything he can to keep us from hitting the water. And then the hoist operators in the back, doing everything he can to cable management and conning and everything else. And I'm back there trying to help him and just praying to God that, Troy's going to be okay. Meanwhile, there's a guy in a Gumby suit down there floating around. One of these guys going to pick me up out of the water. By the way, it's January, 3:00 in the morning in 60-foot waves. And I called for the abort. And so, in calling for the abort, we raised him back up, no questions asked. You know how it goes when you say abort, it's abort. It's not, hey, let's talk about this and maybe we don't abort. It was abort. Abort means abort. And so Troy came up into the aircraft and his eyes were as wide as dinner plates, and to see Troy look like that, very sobering to see Troy have his ass handed to him like that. He was beat up, swinging around down there on that cable, getting beat up by these waves, and no closer to picking up that survivor who's still down there in the water, by the way.
Jeez, man.
And so I said, all right, Troy got on ICS and I said, look, guys, I said, direct deployment's not working. I recommend harness deployment, let Troy swim to the guy. That's what he does. He swims. I remember saying that, which is kind of a snarky comment, but I never signed up for the direct deployment anyway. I wasn't a fan of it with this one. And I just didn't think it was going to go well, and it didn't. It didn't go well. And so one of the pilots up front said, Shannon, I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose Troy tonight. I said, I'm there. That's why I'm here. We're not going to lose anybody tonight. Let Troy swim. Troy, how do you feel? And Troy said, couldn't agree with Shannon more. I don't want to go back down and try another direct deployment. It just isn't working. And by the way, we're constantly running out of gas. So,
yeah.
And there's 3 people still on that fishing vessel.
Holy
and so
cow.
we really got to get this. We've really got to get this going. We don't have a lot of time here. So long story short, Jason, we put Troy down. He disconnected from the cable and he swam up to the survivor. And, Craig put the basket down and Troy manipulated the man into the basket and we hoisted him up, and then we hoisted Troy up and everything was good. Well, on his way up, Mark Ward says, Shannon, what do you think about, we put you down for the second one? Because, Troy had been through the ringer just then.
Yeah.
2 deployments, 1 recovery, probably a maximum of 45 minutes in the water. And we've got 1 guy picked up so far.
Holy cow.
And it was in that moment that I thought, wow, okay. I mean, I was resigned to, I'm here to be a backup. This is Troy's case. Well, now this changes things. Now I'm getting ready to be the guy. And it's going to be Troy's turn to be my backup. And I said, well, let's see how Troy feels. And he comes up, and again, he's got this look on his face like, he just got slapped at the dinner table. and he gets on the ICS, and I said, Troy, how do you feel? And he goes, how about you get this one? Like, we didn't have to run it by him. He said, how about you take this one? I'll take the third one. You take the last one. We'll back and forth on it.
Wow, what a great idea! Mind blown right now. You've got me from the time that you called an abort to reset everybody. That's such a big moment in this case. To now, you and Troy are going to go 1 for 1 to get that break, that 10-15 minute break in the aircraft. Brilliant.
Worked out really well. It did. It worked out really well. I went down, I got the second guy. Same thing. I disconnected from. What I remember is, of course, I'm trying to stay situated so I can keep my eyes on him. But of course, I'm getting blown all over the place from the wind and the rudder wash and, everything in between. Trying to, keep my arms straight, my legs situated so I can maintain eye contact with him. And before I know it, I'm in the water. And I can see his strobe light going off, and it seems like he's 100 yards from me. And I disconnect and I start swimming towards him, and I'm going down one wave, and I see him at the top of another one, and he's still a good distance away. Get to the top of the wave, back down, and boom, he's right there already. Like, holy cow, man, you were a football field away from me, and within seconds, he is right on top of me. That's how fast everything was moving around. And I literally had to grab him as he was passing me, because he's in a Gumby suit on the surface, getting blown all over the place. And, you know, I literally had to grab him as he was passing me by. And so I grabbed him, and, you know, I put him in the basket, and then I got hoisted, and then Troy went down to get the third one. And then here we are, we're at the last one. And I just had this feeling that if something's going to happen, it's going to be now. If something bad is to happen, it's going to happen now. And I just had this feeling of like real concern that something bad was getting ready to happen. It is very troubling. And these hoists were high because the seas were high. And I think we had a rat out hold feature set at 80 feet. And so as a wave would cross under us, we would show 20, and then we'd go back to 80 again. So they were consistently 60-foot waves.
Holy cow.
And as we recovered the last guy, and I got into the basket, which, by the way, I was never a fan of. It just felt uncomfortable. I felt very defenseless sitting in the basket.
Yeah.
I got in the basket and, you know, got jolted out of the water. And before I know it, I'm, you know, 40 feet, 50 feet in the air, and I'm swinging really, really bad. And as I'm swinging, I can almost see the front of the aircraft, and then pendulum swing the other way. And I look over my left shoulder, and I can see it right now as I'm talking to you. I was sure I was getting ready to hit the stabilator and the tail rotor blades.
Holy shit.
It was the most violent swing. And, you know, funny enough, that actually makes it into the Distinguished Flying Cross citation, into my award citation. I nearly impacted the tail of the aircraft.
It does say
that swing.
And actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to read that specifically because it does talk about it where you, the swing, let's see, the violent motion of the helicopter and strong winds made the hoist extremely hazardous. The swing from the hoist when yanked from the waves was uncontrollable. He swung wildly beneath the helicopter. He almost was able to touch the stabilator during the last hoist. Crazy.
Yeah, I was within, you know, I just remember thinking to myself, I'm way too close to the tail rotor blades right now. Like it was not anything I had ever seen before. It was completely out of control. I was spinning and swinging simultaneously. And I just remember looking over my left shoulder and literally thinking, I may hit the tail right now.
Oh my God.
And I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, which nobody can hear me because I'm down under the aircraft. I just kept saying, come on, come on, come on. Like it was a very, very powerful and scary, I'm going to say 5 to 7 seconds until I was able to get, you know, just outside the doorway. That was another sort of defining moment for me is, you know, I had swung, we all have swung under the aircraft before.
Yeah.
I had never swung like that. Like that was next level shit right there.
I've never had that bad ever. Like I've had some pretty bad spins and some pretty bad swings, but nothing to that extreme, not even close. Like you know, I hear guys that have looked in from the left side of the aircraft and they're looking like through the cabin, you know, like, or you know, it might be an exaggeration, but they're up in that to go all the way to the back. I personally have never experienced that, nor do I want to. So, dude.
Yeah. Not a comfortable feeling. You are pretty defenseless when you're on the hook, but especially sitting in the basket like that, you just feel like you can't fend anything off. You're just sort of along for the ride. It's not a comfortable feeling.
Wow. Shannon. Holy cow. So now you get back in the aircraft and then you've got all 4 survivors. I mean, you and Troy together have I'm you know what? You and the entire crew have got to have such a sigh of relief that it's over. And yet you still have to fly back 100 miles or whatever, to get back to the air station. You're not done. Like even though you're done, you're not done.
Right. Yeah. It's you're not done until the plane has landed and you've shut down, especially in weather like that. But, and in all honesty, with cases like this, it's not often until the next day that it hits you when you're called to do a mission like that. You just go out there and you do what you do. And people refer to folks like us as heroes. And it's almost cliche. Nah, we're not heroes. We're just doing our job.
Right.
But those aren't just words. That's legitimately how we feel when we go out there and do what we've been trained to do. And we do it for the love of the job. We do it out of appreciation for being in a position and having the ability to do something like that.
Yeah.
We do it for the brotherhood. We don't do it for the medals. We don't do it for the news interviews. We don't do it for the notoriety or the books or the toys or the movie sales or whatever. It's not why we do this stuff.
I can't agree with you more. I really cannot agree with you more.
It's really about our brotherhood and the connection between yourself and another aircrew member and the machine that you're flying, and to save lives. And, the gravity of these scenarios, of mine and all of the other folks that get into this line of work that you're going to interview over time, I bet we would all agree that sometimes it never hits us.
Yeah.
What's happened, or if it does, it's a delayed entry. It hits you the next day where you're walking around a grocery store and you're reflecting on what just happened the night before. And I found myself looking around at just random people who had no idea about what I just put myself through. Like they're just living their lives.
Yeah. And
going about their day-to-day business and had no idea that just 40 miles to the east, absolute hell was breaking loose last night.
Yeah.
And it's very humbling to be in a city. It's a very strange place to be, to go through things like that. And it's like folks go off to war, and they're deployed for 9 months or a year, and then they come back and like life as you know it is just continuing. And that's how it is for us as Coast Guard swimmers. We go out and we do the thing, and sometimes these cases are disastrous, where people don't make it. We're recovering bodies and things like that, and those things weigh heavily on us. But we've got to come back and function in a shop and function in life, in our relationships, and it's hard to do that. It's very hard to do that, to flip that switch, to compartmentalize what you've just been through and go on and function as not a Coast Guard swimmer, but just as a person in society. It's very hard to do.
Shannon, I cannot agree with you more. You are spot on with everything you're saying.
It's, Jason, it is I think I said this, it is the greatest blessing of my life to have been a part of that. And it's probably the greatest years of my life. I'll continue to try to work to find something better, but I'm going to be hard pressed to find anything that tops being a part of something like that. You know, I find, you know, the beauty in life and the fun things in different ways now. And I sometimes have to get creative because, you know, once a Coast Guard swimmer, always a Coast Guard swimmer. We got to find ways to scratch that itch. But
yes, sir.
it truly is the greatest honor of my life to be part of that rescue swimmer brotherhood, to have my number along with so many others out there. And I'm just very grateful.
Wow, man, Shannon, I cannot thank you enough for sharing that. And, you know, for me, it's like everybody out there, if you Google this, you can easily read any of the awards and whatnot, but it's another thing to be told the backstory and to really get into the details. And this is why I love talking about this stuff. I mean, you and I have sat down about a couple other cases and stuff, and it's just, you know, it's us boys in the shop, you know, just telling stories, sea stories.
Right. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome job. Awesome job to the whole crew, man. You guys, this was gnarly. 4 lives saved, straight up. They would not have come home, guaranteed.
No, they probably would not have made it that night. No, it was a situation, and you know, the 4 guys, before I became part of their crew, they discussed that. One of the guys said, "Look, I don't want to add pressure to this, but we have to say it. We don't go out there and these 4 are not going to make it tonight." I mean, I remember, I believe it was Mark Ward that said that, and they all agreed that's not a stretch. They won't survive, and they wouldn't have. They would not have survived. It would have killed them.
Wow. God certainly blessed us with a skill that he knew was going to be needed. So I'm happy I'm part of this brotherhood as well. Very much so.
Yeah.
So, man, oh gosh. Shit, and I'm like beside myself right now. This just incredible. You've done an amazing job. You've had such an amazing career. I do want to touch on one thing, and I don't want to take away from this, but I do want to bring up a couple of things because you actually haven't stopped, which is amazing to me. And one of the things that just one is you did a swim for 24 hours for those that have lost their lives, because we have 4 rescue swimmers that died in the line of duty. 2 of them were on SAR cases and 2 of them were in training flights. They're never going to come back. And you did something that no other swimmer has done to date. And that was do a 24-hour swim in memory of those guys.
Yeah. So, you know, I mentioned, you know, there's a couple of times in our careers and in our lives that are pivotal, defining moments for us. And February 28th, 2012 was one of those moments for me. The Coast Guard tail number 6535 helicopter out of Aviation Training Center, Mobile, had a crew of 4 on board that went out to do night swimmer work for Lieutenant Thomas Cameron, who was getting ready to finish up his transition course and go on to Brinken out of flight training. And he was being instructed by Lieutenant Commander Dale Taylor, who was he was definitely one of the 3 most influential men in my life. Dale and I flew together in Savannah at Hunter Army Airfield for the time before I went to Officer Candidate School. And we became very close, and we, you know, had stayed in touch with each other over the years after my tour completed. They were on a training flight, and they were finished with the training portion of the flight and were transitioning to forward flight to get on back to ATC Mobile, and went inadvertent instrument conditions. And essentially, I believe they had turned around to kind of reestablish where they started the flight from. And we're going to go, I think, special visual rules back to the Aviation Training Center. A fog layer had developed over the top of them while they were in close to the water. And they got themselves in a situation where they were disoriented, spatial disorientation and vertigo. And essentially, they did what we call a controlled flight into terrain, essentially flew the aircraft into the water unknowingly. And it unfortunately resulted in the loss of all 4 of those crew members. And my buddy Dale, the aircraft commander, was one of them. And we lost a swimmer in Chief Fernando George. Andrew Knight, who was a very junior hoist operator, flight mechanic. And Thomas Cameron, who was finishing up his final steps of flight training, brand new, very talented young junior officer who was just starting his career. All 4 of them wiped out in an instant. And the loss of that aircraft and the loss of Dale for me personally rocked me to my core for a very, very long time. To say it was devastating to me would be a gross understatement. I was beside myself and just really had a very, very hard time for a long time with that crash. And I was not dealing with the stages of grief in a way that was healthy. And I recognized it. I knew that I was fixating. I was not able to get over it. People seemed to be moving on and I wasn't. And I felt like I needed to do better by myself. And I felt like that's not something Dale would want for me. And so I chose to do something constructive, to turn my grief into something that maybe was positive.
Nice.
And so I reached out to Dale's wife, Teresa, and I asked her what her thoughts would be if I set out on an endeavor to do a memorial swim for Dale. And she said, well, Shannon, not only do I appreciate that, but the timing is just right. Coming up on 3 years since the crash, all the hoopla is sort of gone, the memorial services and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And so it would just be nice to see something like that, to continue to remember Dale. And, I had 2 small boys and certainly would mean a lot to them. Not only do I agree with it, but I'll be there to watch you do this one. So I decided from that, since I had her blessing, that I would go ahead and set out on an endeavor to swim 24 hours nonstop to remember Dale. And that was a 9-month process that began with me watching a presentation that was given by David Goggins, who's a retired Navy SEAL. I believe he was a chief when he retired. Yep. Back in 2013, he came to Charleston with Marcus Luttrell from the Lone Survivor and Operation Red Wings mission. They came to Charleston and spoke, and a buddy of mine went and saw that presentation. It was fantastic. And I was just so enthralled by David Goggins and just what an incredible human being, and his spirit and just everything that moves him and makes him what he is. I could really connect with that as an AST. And I just thought, you know what, man, I'm going to follow this guy's lead, and I'm going to use the fire that's inside me to do something positive with what's hurting me. And I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to make it into something positive. And
that's awesome.
And so I did, man. I set out on a journey to train to swim for 24 hours. Had no idea what I was doing. Not every day. There's not a lot of information out there for someone that wants to swim in a pool for 24 hours straight in terms of what to do, how to train, what to eat, what not to eat, how often you eat. And so I got in and I just started doing it. I mapped out a training plan over 9 months, jockeyed the throttles a little bit, figured out what worked, what didn't. And the way I did this, Jason, was I started out with measured distances. So I did 1 mile and 2, then 3, then 4, then 6, then 8, then 10. And once I got to 10 miles, I'm like, okay, well, how many hours am I spending doing these long swims? And these were nonstop. So 8 and 10 miles nonstop in a pool.
That's a long way, boy.
And it was a 25-meter pool. So it was back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Which made me sick. It made me sick. It was a lot of, just the directional change and just, a lot of things we could go into. That could be a whole different podcast. But anyway, I switched gears, and since it was 24 hours was the final goal, I started switching to hours, and I got to a point where it's like, okay, well, my last 3 swims before the 24, I was gonna do 2 12-hour swims, 1 14, and then I was going to jump from 14 to do 24 a couple weeks later, and then we'd be done. And the 24 was going to be on the anniversary of Dale's crash.
Wow.
And so, Jason, what I decided to do was, because the 2 12 hours and the 14 were big deals themselves in terms of where I was in my training for this, and let's face it, 12-hour swim nonstop is 12 hours of swimming nonstop.
Right.
I felt like those could go into the, I could memorialize the other 3 gentlemen that perished in this mishap with those. And so the first swim that I did for 12 hours went to the most junior guy. He got the first one. That was Drew Knight. And the entire Coast Guard unit was there. We had, some local news showed up for it.
Nice.
And so the first one went to him. The second 12-hour swim went to Thomas Cameron, the junior pilot. Then the 14-hour went to our fellow rescue swimmer, Fernando George. So I did the 14-hour swim in his name. And then when it got to the 24, the main event, I had switched over to this 50-meter pool and in downtown Charleston. And the city of Charleston completely rallied around me with this. All the news was there.
Wow.
Coast Guard headquarters came down for it. Air Station Savannah, the Citadel, Charleston Fire Department, and Police Department showed up. It was a big deal here in our community. Of course, Teresa and their 2 small children came from Mobile to see the swim and be a part of the event. And at 2:28 on February 27th, I got in the pool after an opening ceremony, got in the pool and pushed off and didn't stop for 24 hours. And at the end of that, I had logged, I believe, 781 laps.
Jeez,
Which I believe equated to about 28 miles.
Wow.
And so at the finish, after completion, I look back on the event and I thought, how do you feel about the crash? How do you feel about, the loss of Dale? And what I came to was that I had accomplished what I needed to, which was to work through my own grieving process in a way that was constructive, that would help me to honor him, honor his family, honor the other gentlemen and their families who were lost in this devastating crash, and move on with my life. And that's what I did. That's what I did. And the last thing I'll say, and it's a little bit of a plug, but there's a nonprofit called Operation 300 that was put together by a fallen SEAL Team 6 member His name was Aaron Vaughn. And Operation 300 is for children who are left behind when their parents are killed in, line of duty related things like this. And Aaron was a SEAL Team 6 guy that died in a mission called Extortion 17. And the money that I raised, which I believe was thousands of dollars, through the generosity of everybody that was following this,
Nice.
that money went to Operation 300. So in part, this was ironically, watching David Goggins, retired Navy SEAL, this was a sort of a Navy SEAL Coast Guard swimmer joint thing, because Operation 300 is who received the money for it. He was a SEAL Team 6 guy. I originally got this plug from David Goggins. It sort of tied us together. I just found that to be really, really cool. And at one point, the commandant for the Citadel Corps of Cadets, who is a retired Navy captain, also a SEAL, got in the pool with me and swam for about 3 hours side by side with me.
Oh, that is awesome. I didn't know that.
It was just the whole thing was incredible, man. And
oh man, that's killer. Good for him. Dude, I mean, I can't give you enough credit, Shannon. 24 hours in the pool. I go 2 hours and I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I'm done. 24 hours,
It was a nightmare. I mean, to be honest, it was a nightmare. It was very, very monotonous. It was torture. It was torture to go back and forth and stare at those pool tiles for that long. I had John Williams, Coast Guard swimmer, drove in from Elizabeth City and sat poolside through the darkest hours with me. It was very emotional. It was torture. My body was broken. And I just swam I'd say probably 95% of my swim was crawl, American crawl stroke.
Yeah.
And I would try to switch to side stroke to give my shoulders a little bit of a break. But most of it was just head down, grinding away at it. And having John there, and having the people that really were most important in my life there with me throughout that entire event is really what helped me to get to the end of it.
Dude, that is incredible. Incredible. Shannon, you are one heck of a guy. There's no doubt about it. It's awesome. We've been on here for a little while now. I'll ask one more question and then I'm happy to call this good. But with everybody that's coming up, whether it's rescue swimmer, whether it's going officer, whether it's finding that thing that you want to overcome. And I know that's a very broad question, but if there's a piece of advice that you could pass on from everything you've learned in your career, what would that be?
Well, we're here for a finite number of days. We're not here forever. And for me personally, and doing all of the self-reflection that I've done over the years, the one thing I don't want to have happen to me when I'm in my final moments here is I don't want to look back and say, I wish I had done this.
Yeah.
Or if only I had done that differently. I want to, personally for me, I want to live my life in a way that says, hey man, I left it all out on the field. Nice. And that's proven quite beneficial. I'm almost 50 years old now, and I'm holding up pretty well, and I'm able to still kind of do the things that I enjoy doing, and I enjoy life. And so if there's an inkling in you to go and get something done, go and get it done, and don't let anything stop you from getting it done. That's whatever that thing is, that's really how I choose to live my life. And I want to pack as much into this life as I possibly can, because you don't get any do-overs.
Nope.
You just don't. So it's a one shot, and, funny enough, Jason, every time I was sitting in the doorway of that aircraft, I always thought to myself for a second, and you know how lucky we feel, right? When you're sitting there in the door and you're the guy.
Yeah.
This is your case. Right now, you're here. It's here and now. It's like that Van Halen song, Right Now. And, that's every moment I had to sit in the doorway. I always took a moment, no matter what it was, to say, appreciate where you are right now, because one day this is going to stop. And, that's it, man. Just appreciate where you're at. And if you're not where you're at, where you want to be, do everything you can to get there.
That is some great advice. And just so you know, I know we can't see each other right now, but I am smiling ear to ear because I believe that. I am so thankful as well for everything that I've been given. I thank God every day. So, holy cow. Ladies and gentlemen, Shannon Scaff, rescue swimmer, number 437. Dude, I cannot thank you enough for coming on to the Real ResQ podcast with me. It has been an
I appreciate it.
Honor to have you here.
Thank you.
So, on that, I'll let you get out of here, dude.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, Jason, and good luck with this endeavor, man. I think it's really cool, and it's an honor to have someone still interested in, the things that we've done. I can't wait to hear the other stories from the other guys, and it's always good to reconnect with the brotherhood, man.
No doubt. Well, I'll keep you on the list for sure. I'll be messaging you again for sure.
Sounds good, man. Look forward to it.
Awesome. And then with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute and, like my daughters like to tell me, like and subscribe. Oh yeah. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story that they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you as a guest. Or if you have any questions about any of the rescues or anything else that we talk about here on this podcast, send me an email. TheRealResQ@gmail.com. That's TheRealResQ@gmail.com. You can also check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page at The Real ResQ. That's at TheRealResQ. I also want to give a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember that when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.